Hello, hello, and welcome back to Retrieving Sanity with your podcast host, Keegan, and this is your podcast for all mental health, addiction, recovery issues, and topics. And I've got a question for you today. Do you know what purpose is? Because I feel like I've been told to find purpose a lot, and I'm not really sure what it is or how to find it. So I've got a special guest with me today. His name is Ian, and he is the founder of PurposeU, and there's a whole lot more that goes on with that. So over the last 20 years, Ian has helped more than 400 organizations to find their purpose and become consistently uniquely remarkable through his proprietary blueprint process. Blueprinting defines organization's purpose in 7 words or less and uses it to design how it will operate and communicate. So we can take this kind of same structure and apply it to people, right?
Absolutely. And that's what happened, is that I created this structure or model, as you said, and have been doing it for about 20 years.
Sweet.
But then when COVID hit, and I knew that we were not going to get much business for like at least 2 years, I decided to get my business coaching certification to tide me over. And that's when I adapted this corporate model for defining your purpose and having it guide everything you do and say. I adapted it to individuals. Initially, I did it just one-on-one in the coaching, right? If you were my client, we'd define your purpose, and then I would coach you through the filter of your purpose. But then I actually had lunch with a 5-time corporate client of mine. Every time he got a new CEO gig, he brought us in to do a blueprint.
Nice.
And I told him about this individual blueprint, and he said, whoa, I have an online teaching infrastructure that I can just plunk on top of your personal blueprint. And rather than you doing it one-to-one, you can do it one to millions by teaching it in a course. And I went, oh, that kind of appeals to me.
Yeah.
And so I have one business that's like this big sort of process for defining your purpose and having it guide everything you do and say. And then I have this second business over here, which is the individual extension of it, so that people can actually find their purpose and then lead a purpose-driven, a meaningful, purpose-driven life.
Wow. That is really interesting because it takes both the corporate soulless aspect and brings in the humanity at the same time. And I really like that because it's not so much sitting there saying oh, we're here for money.
Yeah.
So real quick, I did forget to ask you, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good.
Good.
I've got this bizarre thing happening with my eye, but it's temporary.
Oh, okay.
So I'm actually cross-eyed. So I have to keep one eye covered so I don't see double.
Really?
Yep. I woke up a month ago.
Huh. And it's just been like that?
Yep. And it cures itself.
Wow. Okay. Well,
other than that, I'm hunky-dory.
Man, I don't know about you, but I feel like having my sight be all messed up all of a sudden would have really put me in a tizzy.
Kind of. And it causes a lot of fears about, hey, what's going on inside here that caused this to happen. But fortunately, all the bad stuff got removed.
Well, that's really good. I'm really glad to hear that it's temporary and everything. But whenever you said that you were stricken with fear about that, do you feel like you were losing your purpose?
No. So here's the rule. And I know we're going to talk about what purpose is.
Yes.
But before we talk about what it is, or maybe I should start there and then talk about how it benefits you when you are feeling anxiety, fear, depression, any of those negative feelings that are related to mental health issues, whether they be just sort of caused by what's going on around you or they're more organic. So as we were, as I was telling you before we started recording, if you go online and you read about purpose, you can find a lot of stuff about purpose. You can find the benefits of it. You can find, but the one thing that you can't find is a definition of what it actually is. And this is my pet peeve, being in the purpose, industry, is that everyone talks about all the great things about purpose, but they don't tell you what it is. Yes. And the guy who told me what it is was Pablo Picasso, the painter.
Really?
Yeah, because he has a famous quote. And his quote is, the meaning of life is to find your gift, right? So the meaning of life is to find your gift, and your purpose is to share it with the world. Right?
Okay.
So I have a tendency to simplify. That's my thing, right?
Yeah.
So I just took that expression from 2 sentences to 1.
Ooh.
And I said, your purpose is to find your gift and share it with the world.
Okay.
All right. So
that.
hold that thought for a moment.
Okay.
20 years ago, when I started the corporate business, it has a 3-part methodology. So it's a set methodology that I lead CEOs through.
Okay.
And the first part of that methodology is to define the one thing at your essence as an organization, company or charity or whatever, one thing that makes you uniquely remarkable.
Okay.
Right?
Just one?
Just one. So
does it have to be the one?
When you think about big companies like General Motors or Apple or Microsoft or whoever, at their core, they have one thing that makes them uniquely remarkable. And if you ever saw Simon Sinek's TED Talk start with why, he told you what Apple's is, right? Apple's is changing the game. So Apple never invented anything.
No.
Not a single thing they invented. But what they did do is they took things that existed and they changed the game. In those things.
Yep.
Computers existed before Apple, but they changed the game with computers with the graphical user interface. Changed the game with cell phones when they stole that whole industry away from BlackBerry and tablets. They weren't the first tablet. So changing the game. There you go. 3 words. And by the way, our standard for articulating your purpose, articulating that one thing that makes you uniquely remarkable, is 7 words or less.
Gotcha.
So Apple changing the game. That's why everyone's there. That's why everyone works there. We want to be game changers. Why do you buy Apple products? Because they're a badge of, they make a statement about you. I'm a game changer because I use an iPhone, But that's the way we wear products and brands. So I created this methodology where you first define the one thing that makes you uniquely remarkable in 7 words or less. And then you use it to design how you're going to operate as a business and design how you're going to communicate as a business. So that all the activities of the business, everything that you do and say, are always all a direct reflection of that one thing that makes you uniquely remarkable. So then I ran into this Picasso quote, which I shortened to, your purpose is to find your gift and share it with the world. And I looked at what I was doing here with companies, and the first step is to define the one thing that makes you uniquely remarkable. That's your gift, right?
Yeah.
So I just started wrapping my corporate service in a blanket of purpose, because your purpose is that one thing that makes you uniquely remarkable. And so once you know what that is, then you can share it with them.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah.
So getting back to your original question, which is when I'm feeling, anxiety or fear or any kind of pain, what role does that play? Well, I'll tell you what my purpose is. Mine is transforming confusion into clarity. That's what makes me uniquely remarkable at my core, right? That's my gift, is being able to transform confusion into clarity. And so whenever you are burdened with the pain of whatever, that's going to compromise your decision-making process. You're feeling anxiety, maybe even feeling fear. You've got all these negative feelings that are happening, and they can disrupt your good decision making and cause you to make bad decisions in that, or just cause you to not make the kind of decisions that are going to help you get out of the hole that you're in. But when you have your purpose sitting there, and nobody can ever take that away from me.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
That's my superpower. So that, by the way, knowing that just elevates my confidence, right? Just knowing that I have a superpower that nobody can take away from me. But the other thing is that rather than asking the question, what should I do here? You know, I've got a whole bunch of options. What should I do here? The question you ask is, which of my options is most aligned with my purpose? So now I'm saying, which of my options is most aligned with transforming confusion into clarity? And that's a far easier question to have or to answer than just the general question, what should I do here? You've got no context, you've got no basis for your answer. Whereas if I say, you know, which direction, which options are most aligned with my purpose, with that one thing that makes me uniquely remarkable, then that's a solid, tangible thing that I'm grounded to that can always help me make better decisions.
That's really cool.
That's the simple definition of what purpose is. Your purpose is to uncover that one thing that makes you uniquely remarkable and share it with the world. And when you know your purpose, one of the primary benefits to you is better decision making at all times, but especially when you're feeling the burdens of whatever it is that you're feeling in the moment. And those burdens are going to compromise your decision making. This is how you keep your decision making on the straight and narrow. Say, what path, what options, what direction, what choices are most aligned with my purpose, with that one thing that makes me uniquely remarkable.
Okay. Wow. So purpose is not only something to do, but it is also essentially an adjective of sorts, or almost a noun that someone has, right? So if everyone has a unique purpose, then everyone is rather unique. But what about the people that feel like they're not unique?
Okay, that's such a great question. That is such a great question. Because I think we got 8 billion people in the world. And I'm going to hazard a guess that at least half of them are walking around saying, there's nothing special about me. And because there's nothing special about me, one, I can't accomplish anything special. And two, I don't deserve anything special.
Yeah, and that's for sure.
Until you can find me two people who are absolutely identical, and even the most identical of identical twins are not identical, until you can find me somebody who is exactly identical to somebody else, out of those 8 billion people, that means that everybody has something that makes them uniquely remarkable. So, sorry. So everybody has something uniquely remarkable. And if they can just discover that and tap into it, they get the benefit. First of all, like I said, it elevates your confidence because you know you have a superpower that nobody else can take away from you. And you know when and where you can use that superpower and be beneficial to other people as well as yourself. Okay. And the other thing is just this whole idea, you know, it's kind of boring in a sense, but just like better decision making. You make better decisions about your life. And who doesn't want that?
Younger me did not want that. I can tell you that. I'm kind of imagining that finding like my personal purpose would be going through a bag of seeds and finding my purpose seed and then going like, all right, well, now which garden do I put it in or where do I put it? You know, does that kind of sound right? Because
the where do you put it becomes easy.
How does it come
once you know everything, once you know what it is, it all falls into place.
Okay. So the purpose is essentially the root of the tree, would you say?
Yes, it absolutely is. It is the root of the tree. And the thing is, you know, but you're sort of asking an interesting question, which is because you said you have to sort through the seeds to find out the one, right? So how do you what is the actual process of sorting through the seeds? And what I do, you can see on the screen that it says PurposeU there. PurposeU is an online course that enables you to define your purpose in 7 words or less, and then use that, you know, to guide your life, to guide a purpose-filled life. And the process that we use, which, by the way, is an AI-driven process. So you have your own personal AI assistant that is helping you through every step of the process. So you've got me sitting on one side with a whole bunch of videos telling you exactly what to do. And then you've got Wordsmith, that's what we call it, Wordsmith on the other side, that is helping you do two things. One is find the words, because not everybody has a great facility for that. But the other thing is to see what we don't see.
Oh, kind of like checking our blind spots, right?
Yeah. So, and I'll get to that in a moment, because what we do is we get you to pick 2 accomplishments from your life.
Ooh.
Ones that you're really proud of.
Okay.
And ideally, you pick one from your personal life and one from your career.
Okay.
And what we do is we break that down. Because here's the thing about it. When you were involved in an accomplishment that you're really proud of, really proud means like you emotionally, I was a part of this, or I did this. And by the way, you could have done it all yourself, or you could be cast of thousands.
Okay.
But whatever your role was, you were really, really proud of it. And what happens is when you're in those situations where you're participating and you're excited and motivated and inspired and that sort of thing, your purpose is raging, because your purpose is that one thing that makes you uniquely remarkable. So you are contributing that one thing that makes you uniquely remarkable to this accomplishment. And your purpose is raging because you're loving what you're doing.
Yeah.
So we say, okay, well, if your purpose is raging while you're doing this, then let's tear it apart. Yeah. Take away all of the accomplishment so that we're just left with the purpose. So what I do is I work you through an AI-assisted process where, and it's 7 steps. And the first step is to identify your 2 accomplishments. So it's super simple.
Okay.
And then I lead you through a process. And in step 7, you produce 3 lists.
Okay.
Your beliefs, your wants, and your talents. And those are the components of your purpose, right? So so you've got a purpose and you've got it defined in 7 words or less. But if you were to tear purpose apart into its components, sort of like breaking an atom apart into electrons and neutrons and protons and neutrinos and all the other wild stuff that's going on at that level.
Yep.
What you get is your beliefs, your wants, and your talents.
Okay.
So from your story of what got you so excited about working in these accomplishments, we get Wordsmith to say, look into that story and give me options for my beliefs, wants, and talents. And it'll produce 10 of each.
Wow. Okay.
Right? And then you just delete the ones that don't resonate with you.
Yeah.
And then you're left with a list of beliefs, wants, and talents. So AI, you didn't see those beliefs, wants, and talents in your story. AI did.
Yeah.
And it said, here's what I see. And you say, all right, I agree with you 70% of the time. And then here's my list. And then what we do is then we enter the next phase of the process, which is to say, hey, Wordsmith, these are my beliefs, wants, and talents. Where's the common thread there that ties them all together in a single phrase of 7 words or less? And it starts pumping out options for you. And you work through the process of pumping out options. Maybe you take a piece from this option and a piece from that one and you put them together. Or maybe it's just sitting right there for you. But that's how PurposeU leads you through the process of breaking down something you know to discover something that you don't know. Yeah. And I was just talking to a guy who went through our course. I reached out to him. I had to start the email with, hey, this is not an automatically generated email. This is really me reaching out to you to ask you. But, I ask people when you got to your 7 words or less, on a scale of 1 to 10, how inspired are you by it? And if it's an 8 or more, I'm happy. But if it's less than an 8, I'm not happy. Anyway, this guy was a 9. And I said, really? And he said, yeah. When those words came out, I just sort of felt my life fell into place. Everything I had been doing and everything that I want to do was reflected in that. And I just sort of felt like coming together.
Yeah.
And I had the same feeling when I came up with transforming confusion into clarity. It's like, oh, that's me. That's me. That's what I love to do, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, holy crap, man! You've created something great, and like hearing him and his reaction to that, like, it's weird because I'm like, as you're describing all this, I'm going through like, okay, I'm going to go do this as soon as we're done here, you know, and I was like having that same kind of emotional feel, like if everything just fell into place all of a sudden, it'd be like, oh, emotional overwhelm, but in the best sense.
Yeah.
You know? And
it's not overwhelmed, though. It's not overwhelmed. It's the opposite.
So, well,
it's the coalescing.
Ooh, okay.
So that you're not overwhelmed, so that it all fits, so that you see, right? So there's a metaphor that I love, and I stole it from a prof at Northwestern University. And he wrote a book that I took a course on it in university. It's called Gödel, Escher, and Gödel is a German mathematician who came up with a theorem that not only rocked the math world, but just rocks the world in general. Escher is, you know, that mind-bending artist that we all had hanging up in our dormitories in university. And Bach is the guy, you know, he composed a few catchy tunes on the piano.
Yep.
He said, you know, there are three different people, but he said there are three different stones cast from the same shadow. No, sorry, it's the opposite of what I just said. There are three different shadows cast from the same stone.
Gotcha.
And he attempts in the book to describe the stone. Well, what I'm going to tell you is that purpose is your stone, and everything that you do and say is a shadow cast from that stone. And Keegan, you don't know what your purpose is in 7 words or less, but it's still there and it's still doing its work. And so everything that you do and say, I'll say for the most part, is a shadow cast from your purpose stone. But when you can articulate it in 7 words or less, then everything you do will be a reflection of your purpose, because you know what it is. You can live your purpose with intentionality rather than having it control you subconsciously like it's doing now.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, you're answering some questions before I even get the chance to ask them, which I love, because it just shows me that you've thought so far ahead in not only the presentation, but the actual work itself, because it also shows me that you've been through this yourself, so you know the questions to ask.
Right.
And that was one of the things was I was going to ask, like, how do we find our blind spots? Like, whenever you were talking about your beliefs, wants, and talents. Thank you. So whenever you were listing those off, I was trying to go through my head, like, what are mine, you know? And then part of me was also going like, well, what if I don't? And then, because I'm going through this whole stage of like going from feeling unworthy and unloved and everything to actually feeling decent. And so part of me is like, well, yeah, I feel a whole lot better, but there's going to be those pitfalls, those blind spots where it's like, what are they? I don't know. But at the same time, what you just described takes so much pressure off. And I think that would be something on someone like myself trying to figure out what is pressure. It's like, not what is pressure, what is purpose? I don't want to have pressure on me trying to figure out my purpose, because then it makes me kind of a little avoidant to it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, the thing is, purpose is like therapy, right? You can't do it. You can't do it to yourself.
Yeah.
So if you go and try and do it yourself, then you're just going to feel anxiety. You're going to feel pressure, and you're going to be frustrated. And the thing is, the two criteria of a good purpose statement, aside being short, clear, concise, and compelling, is it's so logical that it's self-evident, right? You don't have to explain it. Do I have to explain transforming confusion to clarity to you?
No.
Right? And the other is it resonates on a deep emotional level. So it has to resonate on a deep emotional level with me because it's my purpose. For you, my purpose does not have to resonate on a deep emotional level unless the conditions exist for it to be of benefit to you.
Ooh.
So let's say you're not happy at work. And you're depressed, you're feeling anxiety, you're feeling frustration, you're feeling pressure, you're worried about getting fired. And I'd like you to think of your blind spots, not so much as blind spots, but as things that throw barriers in your way. And yeah, they're coming from your blind spot because you may not see them coming. That's fine. But they present themselves as barriers. And then you've got to make decisions about how you're going to overcome that barrier.
And then that challenges your purpose.
Well, then, rather than saying, how am I going to overcome this barrier, which means that you've got, a million options to consider from the sane to the crazy, to what can I do here? What are the options for me that are most aligned with my beliefs, with my purpose? That's a much simpler question to answer. And when you come up with an answer that's aligned with your purpose, remember I said your beliefs, wants, and talents are the components, the elements of your purpose. But when you say, this decision is aligned with my purpose, what you're really saying is it's aligned with my beliefs, wants, and talents. And that's why it feels so natural to you, so organic. Right? It's because you're making decisions that are aligned with your beliefs, wants, and talents. Here's the other thing you can do. You can make a decision that's not aligned with your beliefs, wants, and talents. But you're doing it from a position of full awareness. You're saying, I know this is more aligned with my purpose, but I choose to do this other thing instead. And I am doing it with full awareness that it's not the most aligned. But again, you're doing it with awareness.
In that sense, if you're doing it with awareness, you can't really be mad if anything goes not great, right?
No. You've warned yourself that it might not work. But on the other hand,
go for it.
You've warned yourself that it might not work. But on the other hand, it might. And if it doesn't, then you just go back to your purpose and you say, okay, which of my options were more aligned with my purpose?
So you're saying with everything lining up with your beliefs, wants, and talents, that would really make life easier, because then it's a lot less of, I feel like life, whenever we're living without our purpose and being intentional with it, is more like we're trying to build that statue, like by reduction, and so chipping away at it. But knowing our purpose is more like having a scope, like a frame ready to go, and we're adding to it.
That's right. Okay. You have a context. When you're chipping away there, you're chipping away and you're saying, I'm not sure where I should be chipping away, and I'm not sure what I'm looking for, and I just hope it makes me feel good at the end, whatever I produce, as opposed to having your purpose as a context and saying, this needs to show up. How I chip away at this needs to show up in alignment with my purpose. So I'm going to do. So you have more guidance. For how to conduct yourself going forward.
Right. And because if someone is always continuously chipping away things that they're trying to figure out if it works or not, then they may actually end up missing something because it didn't line up with one of the other two. Right. So that's really interesting. Everything I know about mental health and just personal well-being is wrong. And that's why I'm glad we're doing this.
Let me give you an example of somebody whose life sort of fell into place after they discovered their purpose. So I did a corporate blueprint with a university. And it was a great experience. They loved it. I loved it. We all fell in love, and, we're still 10 years later, we're still in contact. But then one of the guys on the blueprint team, the chief marketing officer, reached out to me when he heard that I, had developed a personal blueprint. And the story he told me was, as a chief marketing officer, all his days were 14, 16 hours a day. And that was pretty well, at least 5 days a week. And then, maybe 4 or 5 hours a day each day on Saturday and Sunday. So as a friend of mine said to me one day, what role do people play in the rat race? They're the rat. Right? So he was a rat. And he was 5 years away from retirement. He was unhappy. It was affecting his health. It was affecting his marriage. And he was looking forward to a happy retirement with his wife. And he said, all I need to do I'm very close to having the money that I need to retire. So I don't need,
money
to stay on this treadmill.
Yeah.
And we said, well, let's figure out what your purpose is. And then, we'll see where that leads things. And not surprisingly, for somebody whose career is to make things clear, to communicate in a way you understand.
Yeah.
His purpose was making things simple. And that really resonated with him. That's what his writing was all about. That's what his communications, and as the overseer of the marketing department, it was creating simple messages that were compelling. And so, but when he looked at making things simple and the life that he was living as the chief marketing officer, it was the other end of the spectrum. It was highly complex. There was a lot of anxiety. There was a lot of pressure, and he hated it.
Yeah.
And so if he was going to live to his purpose, making things simple, then he had to simplify his career.
Ooh, yeah.
And so what his purpose gave him permission to do is do what almost nobody does.
Step down?
Backwards, not down, backward.
Yeah. Ooh, okay.
And he became a corporate writer. And he got hired. So I'm not sure where you are, Keegan. I'm in Toronto.
Texas.
You're in Texas. Okay. So about an hour away from me is a university called the University of Waterloo. And University of Waterloo is well known in Silicon Valley because like 25% of the people in the valley are from the University of Waterloo. It's Canada's foremost math and computer university.
Okay.
I spend so much time creating context for what I'm going to say.
No, you're good. He was stepping backwards.
Right. Yep. So I'm just not sure why I mentioned Waterloo. Oh, I remember now. So the city itself, Waterloo, and the University of Waterloo campus has become an incredible tech hub. There's you'll see RIM has a huge presence on that campus. Apple, Microsoft, face all these companies. They have they have big buildings on this campus, and so there is an organization there that is a nonprofit organization that promotes the Waterloo tech community.
Okay.
And he got a job as a corporate writer for them.
Wow.
So he goes in at 9. He writes all day. He goes home at 5. And that's it. And it's like, first, when he resigned and he first got the job here, it's like, 5 o'clock, my time's free for the rest of the day. Woohoo! Now what am I going to do? I had to figure out the new life, right?
Yeah.
But what he really wanted to do was write novels.
Oh, okay.
So he worked for this organization for the next 5 years, and then he retired.
Okay.
And he and his wife, they moved out to this lovely area on Vancouver Island on Canada's west coast. And he wrote his first novel, and he's in the process of writing his second.
Whoa. So is his book actually out in stores and stuff? Whoa. Okay. Cool. What's his name?
Well, I don't like to tell the names of people.
Yeah, no.
I have permission to tell the stories, but not name them.
Yeah, no, you're good. That was just a confidentiality test.
Yeah. But the thing is, you see how he used his purpose as a decision maker.
Yep.
I had another client. This is. I love telling this story. So I think this was her third or fourth CEO gig. So she,
wow.
She had been around. And we were having a drink after work one day, and she said, I said, how's work going? And she said, well, I'm kind of bored because the company's running itself. And I said, well, I think it sounds like it's time for your next gig. And she said, oh, yeah, it is. But you know what? The thought of it scares the living daylights out of me. I said, what are you talking about? This is a woman who graduated from high school at 16.
Oh, wow.
And had her master's by the time she was 18. And so she said, when I joined this company, it was on the verge of bankruptcy. And I had to put the blinkers on. I had to keep my head down, stick my nose to the grindstone, and all those other cliches. And now 5 years later, the company's running itself. But in that 5 years, because I'm like this, head down, blinders on, I don't know, it feels like the business world has passed me by.
Yep.
I don't know if my skills are in demand anymore. I don't know if I'm current, with. So anyway, she had all this uncertainty, and this really introduces an interesting concept inside the whole idea of purpose, which is trigger events.
Ooh,
right?
Yeah.
So trigger events are things like changing career, whether you're doing it by design or by force, graduation, retirement, empty nest,
and midlife crisis.
Absolutely. And here's the process of a trigger event. The trigger happens. It creates a whole bunch of unanswered questions about your future. And because those questions are unanswered, it causes anxiety or, in the extreme, fear. Right? If you get fired, you're going to feel anxiety and maybe even fear.
Yeah.
Right? So trigger event happens. All sorts of unanswered questions are created. And that creates anxiety or even fear.
Yeah.
And so that's the process for Keegan. It's end of day for me. And oh my God, I don't know what's happening with my brain.
You're good. We were talking about the I'm following right along with you.
Yeah. Why did I bring up trigger events?
Because she's afraid to change careers.
Right. So this was her trigger event, right?
Yeah.
She's choosing to change careers. She's choosing. She didn't get fired. She didn't get laid off. Totally her choice. And she still has the unanswered questions and the anxiety and fear as a result. Is the marketplace going to want me? Are my skills relevant? Will I like my next job? Will the people accept me? These are all unanswered questions for her that cause anxiety. So anyway, I said, well, I tell you what, why don't we figure out what your purpose is and see where that sends us? So I just got her to talk. And she talked about how much she loves cleaning up a mess. Right?
Yeah.
So where she was when we were having that drink was the company's running itself.
Yeah, it's all cleaned up.
It doesn't engage her brain. There's nothing there for her. Right?
Yep.
So, we talked, and she said, I need something that is a huge mess in order to engage my brain. And I said, well, you know what? Here's the image that you're creating in my head. Is that you have this, I don't know military, so I might be using wrong terms, but a platoon or a troop or a squadron or whatever. You got a whole bunch of people who have just been through hell and back fighting, a whole bunch of battles. And they have arrived at the edge of a minefield. And it's like, oh my God, after all of this, and they're afraid. And they're, and this new commander, this new leader comes to them and says, don't worry. I've been through a million minefields safely. I am an expert at getting through minefields. So follow me and I will lead you safely through the minefield. And she said, yeah, that's what I want to do. I want to lead people safely through the minefield. So her purpose became leading safely through the minefield. Right? Okay. And you can imagine you've got all these troops who have just done a wonderful job of winning battles while at the same time keeping themselves alive. And they're cowering at the edge of this minefield, wondering if they're going to be alive in a few minutes. And this person says, I'm an expert. I know how to get through this. I can do it with both hands tied behind my back. Just follow me and I'll get you to the other side safely. And you can just remember I said a purpose statement has to resonate on a deep emotional level. Well, they need her purpose statement.
Yeah,
so it resonates on a deep emotional level to them, and they just say, "Oh, fine, I'll follow you. Just get me to the other side safely." So now here's how it gets used as a decision-making tool. She gets a call from a headhunter, and he says, "Have I got a position for you? This company's doing great. It's like on a hockey stick to the moon, and what it needs is a really good CEO to keep it on that path to Of really aggressive growth." And
she said no.
Her response, you got it bang on. No. There's no challenge there for me. Everything has already been put into place. And she said, I need a tire fire. He said, well, I got a steaming pile of garbage over here, but I'm embarrassed to show it to you. And she said, that's what I want to see. That is what I want to see.
Oh.
So she could have walked in, the first job, 99 out of 100 CEO prospects would have said, bring it on, give me that job. That's a dream job. Mm-hmm. And she said no, because she knew it did not align with her purpose, that it didn't align with her beliefs, wants, and talents. Huh. But a tire fire does.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, if there's not a challenge for her, then it's definitely not going to be interesting or fun or anything. I wonder if she has ADHD. Because I know that fits in my bill right there.
She may have.
Real quick, before we get too much further, we are nearing the end of this episode. I know we've got about 15-ish minutes or so for radio cut and stuff, but I've got to ask, because this is an awesome conversation, and I know we cannot get all of it in just 1 hour. So do you think that we could have you on in the future, possibly?
Absolutely.
Sweet. Because I don't think we really got too much of your story either. So I would love to, like, maybe dive into it a little bit more. But I mean, there's so much with purpose and everything, because we hear all about it from the other side, but not from the let's actually do it side. So real quick,
do you want me to tell you like the origin story?
Yeah, sure, go for it. Yeah.
So it started with that book that I told you about. I took that course in university, and it was like, normally you take a course and there's a textbook on the topic. Yeah. This course was the textbook.
Oh, okay.
Gödel, Escher, and Bach. Uh-huh. And I had to do a paper for it. And keep in mind, you can tell by my gray hair, this was back in the early 80s.
That's not that long ago.
DNA was a new thing back then.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to do an essay for this course on DNA.
Okay.
And it was sort of like DNA for Dummies. Oh. And I had a roommate who was, one of the first genetic biology PhD candidates. And so I just grilled him. And he had all the detail, all the scientific detail. And I had to cut through that.
Ooh.
Get to the simple. And so what I did is I wrote a paper that used geography as a metaphor for DNA, right? Oh. So Toronto is the largest city in Canada. It's actually the third largest city in North America. So it only trails behind New York and LA in terms of size. And so I said, inside, imagine that, this whole surrounding region is a cell. And Toronto is the nucleus of the cell. It's the headquarters, right? The corporate headquarters are in Toronto.
Uh-huh.
But the manufacturing plant is an hour away where, my university is that I was telling you about before.
Yeah.
So plans for what the plant is going to do have to be created at head office. And then they have to be transcribed, let's say, onto a piece of paper. And then that piece of paper has to be transported to the city an hour away where the manufacturing facility is. And then it has to be read there, and the manufacturing has to happen.
Yeah.
Right? That's the way a cell works. Messenger DNA is what carries the instructions. Transfer DNA is what carries it to the other place in the cell. And then once the messenger DNA gets the instructions, get to the manufacturing plant, then the manufacturing plant produces proteins, because that's what cells do. They produce proteins, among other things, but primarily proteins, I think. So I just used that sort of regional manufacturing plant and head office metaphor. God, this story is just getting so long. I'll abbreviate it.
No, you're fine.
But what that paper taught me, because it was DNA for Dummies, essentially, and that people who knew nothing about DNA could read it and say, oh, I understand DNA now. And that made me very proud. So this is where the simplifying started. Then I got a job when I left university at an advertising agency. I was a copywriter. And I'm sitting in front of my computer. Pardon me, I'm sitting in front of my typewriter, right? So I'm dating myself. Typewriter.
Oh, boy.
And I'm typing words, and they're dribble. They're cliche driven. It's awful. And my desire is to get to sort of the root, the authenticity of the brand or the product or the service, the company or whatever. And all I'm producing is cliches. So I went to a copywriter and I said, can you make me a sign that says, is that true? And I taped it up on the wall behind my typewriter so that as I'm typing, I'm constantly reminding myself to ask myself, is this true what I'm writing down? Is it true to the brand? Is it true to company? Is it true to the product? And it didn't make me a better copywriter, but it was the right idea. But this whole idea of, is it true, just became an obsession for me. And that's why I wanted. So I had a number of careers in between then and now. I was a computer consultant for a while. I was in the television business. And then I was in this business. And in all those businesses, getting to the root of what the business was all about became an obsession to me. And that's why, the methodology starts with defining, digging, and defining that one thing at your essence that makes you uniquely remarkable as an organization. And when we did the blueprint for TIFF, the Toronto International Film Festival, it's the second biggest film festival in the world behind Cannes. And the COO said, we've gone through a number of these strategic exercises before, but you took us about 6 layers deeper. I was very flattered by that, but that's what it takes, 6 layers deeper, right? To get to the essence, to get to the root. And when we get there, the company feels transformed. And I feel, I just can't tell you how good I feel when they discover their purpose statement and they're super excited about it. That's the dopamine hit that, that keeps me in this business. And when a customer of PurposeU said to me, oh my God, my life just fell into place. Everything I've done and everything I want to do, it's all reflected in this. It's like, okay, I'm done. That was wonderful.
That is so cool. I love that. And I'm glad you went into more detail with the origin story, because I was kind of thinking, like, if I had to define what your purpose was from like the beginning with the DNA stuff, I would have been like, your purpose is just asking questions. But, because you're getting through that clarity and stuff, but the way that you actually utilize it is showing that it's totally a verb. Like you said, it's something that you gift to the world. And I love that. Yeah.
And asking questions, by the way, is part of the methodology. So in the corporate blueprint, we don't do this with individuals, but in the corporate blueprint, one of the most important questions that we have to answer is, what is your methodology? Oh, and here's the thing, is it always throws companies for a loop, because they don't know that they have a methodology. Every company has a methodology. My methodology, just to give you a frame of reference, my methodology is 3 parts. Define what makes you uniquely remarkable in 7 words or less. Use it to guide how you operate, how you communicate, and use it to guide how you operate. That's the 3-part methodology of the blueprint. And every company has a methodology, and we have to define your methodology. And again, I've forgotten why I'm telling you about methodology. Oh my God. You got to start doing these interviews, not at the end of the day. That's my excuse, and I'm sticking to it, Keegan.
I mean, if you could convince somehow my bank account to take in podcast interviews, I would be more than happy to do this all day, every day.
Right.
Got to work the normal 8 to 5 in the meantime, so I'm trying to get Retrieving Sanity to be a nonprofit mental health resource.
Oh, that would be great. That'd be great. So where I was going, though, was that when we define a methodology, you would have thought my purpose. No, not my purpose isn't asking questions, but asking questions is a fundamental part of my methodology, because my methodology, my individual methodology, is to deconstruct. So issues, I say transforming confusion into clarity. And what that means is that you've got issues that are big and complex, don't have answers, and they're causing, stress, anxiety, fear, whatever, right? So how do I transform confusion into clarity? Well, first of all, I get you to express what the big confusing issue is, but it's too big to take on like that. So I break it down into smaller pieces, much the same way I said to you, that's the methodology we use in the PurposeU course. We start with 2 accomplishments of yours. Then we deconstruct them into simpler and simpler elements. And at some point in that deconstruction process, your purpose pops out. It just pops out. And because you're breaking the complex issue down into simpler and simpler elements, when it pops out, it's simple and it's self-evident. And then you just work your way back up and you put it all back together. So deconstructing is my methodology, and asking questions is my means to deconstructing. So you weren't far off.
Okay. I love that. Thank you for the clarification and for the expansion as well, because it is great to know the origin story of Ian and how PurposeU came about, because I feel that it's going to help out a ton of people because, like I said, I'm going to try it out whenever we're done here, so we'll see how it goes. But in the meantime, are you ready to play that game?
Oh, yeah, sure.
All right.
I'll do my best. No guarantees.
Hey, I'm still learning how to do it because it's different for every guest, and I'm just trying to learn how to be the best host I can. So here we go. Now, if you don't know anything about my guest today, which you should have learned because, man, we learned a lot about Ian and all about purpose. He has made a name for himself helping people and organizations find razor-sharp clarity, the kind of clarity that cuts through the noise and sticks. Now, he has co-authored a whole book about distilling your why down to 7 words or less, so, I couldn't really resist the urge to flip the script. So it's time for a segment we call Say It Straight, where Ian has to do what he does best, but this time on the spot. Each prompt, they're semi-real, or hopefully real. Each response, just 7 words or less. Think of it like verbal jiu-jitsu, but with less concussions. So,
I'll do my best.
Alrighty. Prompt number 1, your life's purpose, but say it like a cereal slogan.
It's actually the slogan for PurposeU. Life gets better with purpose.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, perfect. No, on the dot.
Question 1 down.
Got it.
Bring it on. Number 2.
Number 2, describe a healthy team culture in 7 words or less.
Coaching. Yes.
Whoa.
So, let me just give you some background.
Okay.
Purpose is the one thing that makes you uniquely remarkable. Culture is the social extension of purpose. It is putting your purpose into play. So when a company says, we want to transform our culture, well, I think you have 2 options. You can sort of nip around the edges and make some incremental changes to your culture, or you can fundamentally transform it. And the way to fundamentally transform your corporate culture is by shifting from a managerial structure to a coaching structure. So if you are my boss, Keegan, no longer do I come to you and ask you what I'm to do, or ask you the best way to do it, or I no longer say, oh, I'm stuck, can you help me out here? Or if I do, rather than answering my question, you be my coach.
Yeah.
And so what a coach does, and I know because I've got my coaching certification, is he or she takes you on a conversation where you discover the answers yourself. And when you discover the answers yourself, you are more bought into them, you understand them better, you're more inspired by them, and you're better able to execute them on them. So, better culture, coaching. Make it a coaching culture.
I love that. And that sounds like a lot of places some of the places I've worked at had something similar, and those were definitely the places that I liked.
Yeah. You were empowered. You weren't told what to do, you were empowered.
Yep. I love that. Thank you, Ian. That was number 2. But number 3 might throw you for a loop, because you're kind of looking the part today. Brand yourself as a supervillain.
Oh, yeah. Cyclops?
Fair enough. Brand yourself as a supervillain in 7 words or less. Could you do that? I mean, it would be the opposite of what you do now, right? You would be sowing confusion into clarity.
Yes. No, I'd be sowing clarity into confusion.
All right. Number 4, convince a burnt-out entrepreneur to keep going in 7 words or less.
Discover your company's purpose. If you're burnt out, right, then... So when you discover your company's purpose, your purpose articulates you much bigger than you have ever seen yourself before. And I'll give you an example in a really boring industry. And I say that with my client's permission. Okay. Because it's an actuarial firm. And until I got the actuarial firm as a client, my most boring client, and I love this company, and the CEO is a good friend of mine, but it was a retail shelving company, right? Home Depot builds a box, they go in, they put up all the rack shelving. unsexy, right?
Yeah.
So my actuarial clients, they told me this joke. How do you know when an actuary is an extrovert? When they look at your shoes when they're talking to you rather than looking at their own. And I can tell that joke because they gave me permission.
Okay.
So these people specialized in defined benefit pensions. You don't need to know, the technicality of that. All you need to know is that if you were a company and you had defined benefit pensions, then you really needed an actuarial firm, and they made a ton of money off of being that actuarial firm. But because defined benefit pensions are too expensive for the company, they shifted to defined, I can't even remember the name. But the point is, for the new kind, you don't need an actuary that much. So they came to us and they said, our future is disappearing before our eyes. Where do we get sales from in the future? Yeah. And I said to them, figure out your purpose, and your purpose will answer that question for you. And to their credit, they said, okay. So I got them to talk, and that's what we do. We just get them to talk and talk and talk. And I said, okay, here's what I heard you say. That the CEO and the COO of your client has to make critical decisions now about how to make big chunks of money grow in the future. Right, they said. And you have mathematical models that you develop that help the CEO and the CFO make better decisions now. Remember that thing, better decisions, about what to do with those big chunks of money. They said, yep. And I said, and you've given me 3 compelling reasons why your mathematical models are better than your competitors. And they said, yep. And I said, well, it sounds like you're in the business of predicting the future. Well, the tops of their heads blew up. So you're talking about people who are risk averse. And the idea that you could predict the future is just like anathema to them. And so I had to get them. I said, no, it's not about predicting your future, but it is about creating a greater degree of certainty. And they were still like, no, certainty. No, we can't do certainty. I said, no, listen to what I'm saying. I'm not saying certainty. I'm saying a greater degree of certainty. And if you're going to push back on that, what's the value of your mathematical models if you are not giving the CEO and the CFO greater certainty about their decisions now about how to make big chunks of money get bigger in the future? And they got that. Their purpose became creating a greater degree of certainty. And here's the interesting thing that happened with their decision. I've forgotten what your question was, but here's what happened. When you define yourself as actuaries or as specialists in defined benefit pensions, defined contribution is the other benefit. So your world is narrow and getting narrower by the day. But when you define yourself as creating a greater degree of certainty, those blinders go like this. And you say, well, we don't have to just do defined benefit pensions. We have a skill set to create a greater degree of certainty anywhere. And so what they said was, we're going to go and we're going to create a new business because our old company is too closely associated with defined benefit pensions. But this new business is going to be about a greater degree of certainty. And we're going to go to 3 businesses in the first year. And we're going to say, we're going to do some work for free. We need to test out our model. And when I went to interview Jill, the CEO for our book, she said, oh, yeah. So we went out to those 3 companies and we told them the greater degree of certainty story. And before we could say to them, we want to do our work for free for you so that we can learn about, how to live this new life, they said, well, that sounds really cool. Give me a proposal. So they learned on the customer's time.
Yeah.
How to be a greater degree of certainty rather than a specialist in defined. And I'll just say as a last point on that, they have this area that's a big cube farm, right? So they've got all these employees working in cube farms. And she said, I was walking through the cube farm the other day, and I was shocked at how many employees had printed out on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper in big letters, creating a greater degree of certainty, and they pinned it up on their wall. Because they were proud of it. They now had a purpose that inspired them that wasn't mathematical models. Mathematical models were just the way that they lived their purpose. But they had this higher purpose, which is creating a greater degree of certainty for their clients. And if after doing what they did, their client says, wow, I was far more confident in that decision than I've been in the past. Well, that's the thing. That's the dopamine hit for them.
Wow. Huh. I love that. That is a really, really cool story. And since you are the first person to play Say It Straight and you have answered your prompts rather well and explained them even better, you have earned the honorary title, the Clarity Conductor of Purposeful Positioning for Retrieving Sanity. Woohoo! So, now, Ian, the name of this podcast is Retrieving Sanity, and we explore how all facets of life impact our mental health. Looking at the incredible motley adventures of your own life, what does retrieving sanity mean to you today personally? And what's one practice or perspective that you would like to share with the audience?
So retrieving sanity to me is staying grounded in your authentic you. Ooh. And when you're not retrieving or retaining or in a position of sanity, it's because, either outside or organic factors have thrown you off that. But when you are in this state of being authentically who you are, that's like an ideal state. And so the one thing that I started doing about 4 or 5 months ago that I noticed had a big impact just on my mental health is I started breathing from my diaphragm the way you're supposed to breathe. So rather than breathing from your ribs, breathe into your stomach. And what I was told and what I noticed is it has a different physiological effect on you. When you, close your eyes or just do it while you're watching TV, just focus on your breathing and breathe into your stomach so that you're breathing from your diaphragm. And I find my body just sort of goes when I do that. Yeah. Right? It just calms down a bit. So all that, whatever I'm carrying in my muscles and skeleton and whatever, it just sort of goes, helps me get to sleep.
Heck yeah.
That's a good thing.
Yeah. Getting to sleep definitely helps retrieve a little bit of sanity at the end of the day. So, Ian, thank you very much for being on the show today.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Keegan.
And I look forward to having you on again because it was so much fun learning all about you and all about purpose and PurposeU. So we've got a little bit of time in between our next episode, so that way we can actually figure out, maybe I'm more aligned with my purpose than I thought I was, or maybe it's something entirely different, who knows? But it's going to be super interesting.
Well, maybe if you do the course, I'll come back on and we'll talk about your experience.
Yeah, we can totally do that. So, Ian, again, thank you for being on the show. I appreciate it very much. And it has been an honor and a pleasure once again. And everyone out there, thank you for listening to Retrieving Sanity on WDJY 99.1 FM. As always, much love to you, yourself, and others if you can, because sometimes loving is hard. But we'll see you next week. And as always, again, try to stay safe. Much love. Sean.